Hello everyone! Despite sharing a border with Brazil, which is the third worst hit country by the coronavirus pandemic, Uruguay has been fighting effectively against the spread of novel coronavirus. My guest is journalist Juanjo Pereira from Uruguay, and he will tell us about what might be behind Uruguay's success story and what the current situation in the country is. Hello, Juan.
Hello, Oscar. I'm so happy and glad to talk to you.
Thank you so much for being here and joining me for this interview. I would like to go back to March. It was the 13th of March when the first coronavirus case was seen in Uruguay. And Uruguay seemed to be prepared in advance. What kind of steps were taken before the coronavirus entered into country? And after the 13th of March, what were the immediate steps taken by the government?
Well, the question is complex, and I will try to make myself understand, not only for my English, but also only explaining the situation. Let's see. Uruguay did not take any special action before March 13th. It didn't. And I will explain later on why would that happen if things are going so well so far. March the 1st, we have a new government with a new political sign than the other. Well, the last government didn't take any action at all, and neither did the new one. We usually, our governments thought COVID-19 was too far away and maybe it would not come in here. But when it happened, when the 4 cases were known, that day when President Lacalle Pou talked to the population, to the people, there were 4 cases, and some things were decided that has been a kind of a way, a special way that Uruguay has managed the situation. The first one, Uruguay didn't have a close down, a quarantine by obligation as other countries, as Argentina did, so hardly with laws, with punishment if people were going out. What Uruguay did was to ask people to stay at home, to call people for responsibility, and decided not to oblige, not to be obligatory that people stay at home. It was please have as conscious things that this is necessary. And it was so. What the government did at once was to close frontiers with Brazil and Argentina, and decided that, well, flights from away were suspended. Classes were suspended from primary school to university, and other activities like our big shoppings were closed. Some commercial or business with too much movement of people were restricted, but there was no other uh, um, decision but calling people to be responsible. And it worked. It worked. For a long time, people stayed at home. People decided to understand that was the best for them. And Uruguay has a big, important history of democracy, of people understanding and being aware that law is important to be taken, to be accomplished, and it worked. Little by little, uh, things started to be open. When I told you Uruguay was not specially prepared with previous actions, I have to say that the country was prepared to have better situations than other countries. First, Uruguay has a good, strong health system. In Uruguay, from many years ago, public health and private health systems work together, coordinated, and that was good to as a challenge to take the situation. A second thing, Uruguay has um, a network, a kind of government network for social aid to help people who are in worst situations, and that is a work that has been done for many years. So Uruguay had the ways to get very quickly to those people who were in most need. Many people, as in the rest of the world, lost their jobs or had all the independent workers that dependent of their everyday work, they suffered very much. And well, the hand of the state was there to help them with, for instance, special programs to make the loss of the work, of the loss of the incomes, not so hard. The government decided that uh, those people who had a salary or income for about $2,000 or more, they had a 20% income or tax for 3 months. That money was got together into a special fund called coronavirus fund, and that helped them also to make that situation where more less aggressive, less difficult for people. Some people so could stay at home because they had that special aid, small, not enough, but it was an aid for people to stay at home. About students and classes, Uruguay has, for many years, have had a very good internet connection. It's one of the countries in the world with best internet connection because it's a small country. They did important investments in that. And another thing is important. As a political state from many, many years, all kids at the school have their computer, that one computer per child that works in Uruguay. And so children in primary school, students in secondary school, teachers, and university students all have their own computer. So when classes were suspended, uh, learning was not suspended. Students and teachers worked all those months from home with special platforms for studying. And so, in that case, also that problem was better resolved. Little by little, things as numbers were good for Uruguay, activities are being opened. Classes first the rural areas schools, not the city schools, but in the most far away places where internet was weaker than in the main cities, for instance. Uh, Classes started, and kids, children, and, and teachers went with protocols, with all that distance, cleaning, all things they have to be taken. And there were no cases of coronavirus when thousands of children and teachers started to go to school again. It also happened with construction workers, building workers, the workers for to build mm, mm, to build houses and hotels and everything. They first decided a special vacation so they didn't have to work and they got paid instead. And one day they decided, the government, let us start with workers, construction workers, to go back to work. That was a cause of anxiety, nerves, because, well, it was dangerous. It didn't happen. It didn't happen any problem. The workers went back to work to build, and there were no special problems at all. Then we are now in the phase of starting with restaurants, theaters, spectacles in general, all with this special new normality as it's known. That means less people in a theater with 2,000 seats, while there was 500 or 200 people allowed to be there. And that in all kind of living, playing, uh, recreation, all that. With a strict protocol, all those activities are starting to work. And it's very good for artists, for musicians, for the workers in restaurants, in house foods, because little by little things are getting to move again.
Let me ask you, it started earlier, right? Towards the beginning of summer, or nowadays we are talking about? So when did they start reopening the restaurants and theaters?
They started to be opened this past 2 weeks.
Oh, it's so new,
And
recently.
people are very recently, and that was demanded, asked, wanted by all those people who work, who live from that, and for the population, people that was sick to be at home every day without recreation, and that repeat. So far until now, it is working and it is working fine. Uh, many workers are still having huge problems to survive. Uh, Uruguay now has been until now uh, working and managing good in a good way the coronavirus. Uh, the cases are still little if we compare with Argentina and Brazil, for instance, on so many countries. The total deaths since March in the country are 45 people. Last day, 1,072 tests were made, and the total of tests done from March to now are nearly 200,000. Remember, Uruguay is 303 million and a half people. So, until now, Uruguay is doing well, but I told you before, there are lights, there are yellow lights, there are warning lights that this can change and can change dramatically. Why? We have a dry frontier with Brazil. We have several cities that are in the frontier in Brazil and Argentina, in Brazil and Uruguay that are dry. It's a city that is half in Uruguay, half in Brazil, and it's the same city. There are two countries, but it's the same city. So, as Brazil has the, the huge amount of sickness, it is very dangerous for Uruguay that that situation get lost of control in those cities we share the two countries. And there have been some cases that come from that situation, from the frontier problems with Brazil. And the other problem is it is happening. People are kind of relaxing. Uh, there is a tradition in Uruguay. It's um, a special celebration called the nostalgic night. That means people one day in the year have that special night that get together, go to dances, go to special foods, and listen music from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s. Nostalgic because you remember again when you were a kid and that's the music you used to like, and that is a very important cultural event. It has been for 40 years, so every year. This year, government asked, please, people not to go, not to meet, not to go to a, a place and gather together because it is dangerous. Well, most people didn't go, but many people did go. And that was 24th of August. And 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks later, cases were up, dramatically up because of that. A few days ago, in a small town, in a rural area, they have a party, some of a happy birthday, a meeting, common people. Well, 5 cases came from that meeting, from one small town to a bigger town, and so on. So now the most biggest problem is if people get relaxed, if people does not maintain the strength to see we have to take care not to get together with others. Everybody wants to be together with others, and we down here are people who hug and kiss, and we are very affectionate in our contacts with others, with friends. And well, that's the thing we have to take care in this moment. Uh, the government has another goal, another thing that is very important. A committee of the best important scientists of Uruguay work with the government without charging anything, by honorary, without charging. Please, people, do not relax, do not think this will not happen to me. I repeat, our government is working well, but is conscious, it's aware that things can get worse if the whole society does not take the real dimension that the problem is.
Thank you so much for joining me for this interview. And thank you so much all for watching us. Stay tuned for more content from Mediascope.